Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Aphex twin of sifting out fights from the Apex bin, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday, the 9th of September, following a week that was chock-a-block, or a weekend that was chock-a-block with fights. Lots going on. Was much of it good? Let's find out. um, I think there was a lot on this weekend. It's hard to know what to give prominence to. And I will probably lose everyone if I immediately start talking about the UFC main event, which impressed me, but also depressed a lot of other people. And I saw a lot of people complaining about it being boring. Same was true at the Bellator main event. I was like, that's impressive, but also consensus boring. She's classically pretty. That was a classically boring fight. I think the co-main of the UFC card was really good. Natalia Silva versus Jessica Andrade. I think probably the biggest hyped win this weekend was also the most anticlimactic, and that was Superlek over Jonathan Haggerty. That was a really exciting fight in the build-up. And I was watching the first fight from 2018 earlier this week and talking about it. And the fight lasted less than a minute. It was crazy. And the really crazy part is that the same thing that got Haggerty caught early in the first fight to not really much, he didn't get hurt a lot, but he got caught with a good elbow in almost exactly the same way, and it got him knocked out in this one. And it's a shame too, because he was looking good. But Haggerty's Haggerty's an interesting fighter to study because he's been growing a lot, quite rapidly, because he's only had like 20 fights or something like that. Whereas obviously Superlek and all the top ties have been fighting forever, and this is sort of the tail end of their competitive career. Once you get to sort of 30, it's like, why don't you just hurry up and die, old man? But Haggerty used to be a kicky boy, very flicky, and he's only really discovered or gained confidence in his right hand recently. Certainly the 4-ounce gloves has helped. Going up to bantamweight seems to have helped, but he started knocking people out with his right hand, which wasn't really one of his strengths. His boxing has never been one of his strengths. Having surprisingly good kicks and a great understanding of the teep game for a Farang is what has typically been remarkable about him. Loves using the teep as a lead, or as an offensive weapon, which is something that a lot of coaches tend to talk their charges away from. They want you to focus on the defensive teep because then you get more bang for your buck, because it doesn't take a big teep to knock someone over on defense or to wind them on defense, as in when they're coming in. And you've got less chance of them parrying it, catching it, you missing altogether, them pulling back and you falling short. But that's part of why the offensive teep has worked so well for Haggerty and his brother and a few of the other guys from his gym. They leap into it, which is kind of dangerous, but also it means that when they pick up that knee and leap in, everyone respects it. So he comes in behind it with that elbow, which he landed on Superlek in the first fight, knocked down some dudes in one with it. But now he's pitching the right hand behind it, and that's been a real powerful weapon for him. But Superlek, man, generational talent, incredible. He's beaten the best guys in kickboxing. He's beaten the best guys in 4-ounce Muay Thai. He's already been a Muay Thai Stadium champion a few times over in his youth. Seems like wherever he competes, or rather under whatever rule set he competes in striking sports, he excels. Can do it going forwards, can do it going backwards, can adapt his game plan. He's most famous for the low kicks, but then he fought Nabil, who's 6'4" at bantamweight, and just hangs his lead leg out there like, please kick at my lead leg and I'm going to pull it away and then murk you on the counter. And Superlek very quickly found out that he wasn't going to be able to get to that lead leg, so he changed up his game plan, pushed him to the ropes and started battering him there. But you'll just as easily see him go on the back foot against Takeru. He was doing a wonderful job with his double jab to get Takeru going back and then low kicking him. And then when Takeru came back at him, he'd hit him with the teep. He'd hit him with the teep to the lead leg. He was doing a beautiful teep to the lead leg that was foot sideways, just inside the thigh. So it pushed Takeru's knee out and then he fell over. And he was landing that whenever Takeru started stepping in for a big overhand. But yes, this fight got off really quick off the mark. Haggerty lands a good low kick, established his lead leg as a threat, picked up his lead leg, stepped in with a jab, pulled from the counter and landed a left hook. That was all great. And then he was like, now I landed my right hand. And Superlek covered up and threw an elbow to get Haggerty off him early on. And then he pulled and threw an elbow as Haggerty lunged in with his right hand, and Haggerty just fell onto it. Went down, couldn't get up, looked like he was in real pain. I think he got caught straight down the side of the jaw. But man, that's the danger. We were talking about this with, we're going to talk about this later with some guy who got knocked out off a step up inside low kick in the first round again. This is an epidemic in MMA at the moment. You know, getting to work too quickly. It's not even like I'm not saying people run the maths in their head. I'm not saying that he's a computer and he's downloading the data. Piotr Jan's curse has been downloading the data for a round and a half and then losing the decision. But getting a feel for how the opponent's going to move and if they're going to sell out on a big counter early on really does help you. You've got more chance of catching someone cold and hurting them if you open up early, but you've also got more chance of getting hurt yourself because if you put a little bit of uncertainty in them, if you show them lots of feints, if you show them lots of non-committal techniques, they don't sell out on big counters in the same way. Because big counters leave you out of position. If Superlek had fallen short on this elbow, he'd be way out of position. Haggerty could hit him with something. You know, it's just how the science of striking works, or the art of striking. But yeah, there's pros and cons to both. But in MMA especially now, I'm just thinking, please slow down. There's so many guys at the moment getting kicked, throwing a hard low kick off the bat and getting hammered on one leg because they expect the opponent to move back. And they don't, because it's been like 30 seconds and they don't really have a read on how the opponent's moving. And the opponent isn't really sure what they're doing either because it's only been 30 seconds. But anyway, it was one of those performances that was so impressive, the knockout, that it also was like anticlimactic because the fight only went under a minute and everyone was settling in for, 5 rounds of banger, especially because their first fight started so slowly and was only just sort of getting cooking when Haggerty got cut. But yeah, definitely go check it out. It's on One. If you want to get it on YouTube without paying for it, live in Thailand. Or if there's some way that you could make your computer live in Thailand, there's your answer. But I feel for One because they've been circling the drain for a while, but now it's becoming very obvious. They had Mikey Musumeci lined up as the co-main event of this. He was taking on Cade Ruotolo, way up in weight, 30 pounds-ish higher. This confused a lot of people on Reddit because they were like, he wasn't cutting 30 pounds on 3 days' notice. No, the fight was 30 pounds lower on 3 days' notice. So Cade pulled out because he's just won the $1 million Craig Jones Invitational. And if he got injured in that, probably a good time to take it off. They're definitely not going to pay him as much in One. So Mikey was left high and dry. And apparently, we only found out at the weigh-ins, he'd agreed to take another grappling match. And they wanted him to defend his title. So he had to get down to... Is he bantamweight? 135? I think it's 145 because they're doing the hydration testing or whatever. But he had to do that in 3 days. If you go from not cutting weight to cutting weight in 3 days, that's very, very hard, almost impossible. I don't think there's a professional fighter in the world in the top 10 of their division who could make weight on 3 days' notice if they'd actively been training for a fight in the weight class up. So Mikey managed to miss weight. They cancelled the fight, and then he tore his lung and got air in his chest cavity by doing Hickson breathing, which is just insult to injury. You do your wushu nonsense part of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it almost kills you. So get well soon, Mikey Musumeci. But that was very weird of One because they've only got like 3 or 4 top guys left. It was Mikey, Haggerty, Superlek, Rodtang. If you're wondering who's a top One guy, it's people who can actually get fights. Because they've got lots of top guys like Regin Ercil, Chingiz Alazov, who's just left, Renia Derrida, who they won't give fights to because they don't want to have to pay them. John Lineker took a Muay Thai match on this card for the first time ever, because they couldn't get him an MMA fight. When Mikey pulled out of this thing, Gary Tonin and Buchecha both said, like, we can't get fights in MMA anymore, please let us go. And then the big feature of their card was they were like, big announcement by Demetrius Johnson. So everyone went, oh, okay, Demetrius Johnson's taking one more fight. That'll keep One going for a little while longer. And the announcement was that he was retiring, which is not really going to add more interest to your future events. Let's jump over to the UFC. Co-main event was what really impressed me. Natalia Silva versus Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade definitely washed. If you watched her in the first round before she'd even been hit by anything, she was flinching like mad. She's walking forward, trying to do her thing. But every time that Silva comes back at her, she just dives her head backwards, closes her eyes. And this was before she even got hit with anything decent. This was before we knew that Silva was coming to swang and bang. But then on the other end of that, I was really pleasantly surprised with Silva. It surprised me with her pop. She was looking good. I've always thought of her as like a flicky kicks, swinging hands, Very, very fast, but not particularly nasty fighter. And in this one, she looked nasty. Her jab was fantastic in this. She fought a fight that I wouldn't have liked someone to fight against Jessica Andrade, in that her back foot was always on the cage. So I think she benefited a lot from Andrade losing her speed and power and toughness, because she was able to go blow for blow with her, basically. And it was still a risky game, but her jab was, every time she popped it out, it moved Andrade's head back 2 or 3 inches. Every time she threw a jab to the chest, Andrade stepped back onto her back foot. She was moving Andrade with her jab, and I thought that was really good. Her left hook looked good. She's always had a good left hook, actually, but the jab was a real revelation to me, and the feints of the jab work really well. She barks on every punch. She does the ki, the ki-ya, the Holly Holm ish. Who was it who used to shout all the time? Was that Chukagian? There's a few women's MMA fighters who've done it, and it's really annoying. But it does seem to sell it a little bit extra when you then fake a jab and you bark as you throw it, because her feints were working fantastically. What I really liked about her fake jab, or her feinted jab, feigned, better word, was that she moves her whole body. She steps forward a little bit, she drops her weight a little bit, she shrugs her shoulder a little bit. It's exactly what Sugar Ray Robinson, his autobiography is interesting because he doesn't give an awful lot of like technical ideas, but one of the things he really hammers home is get to a mirror and work on feinting your jab, because that's the thing you're going to be doing tons of. It's the thing you're going to be doing when you're thinking or taking a breather, when you're setting anything up. And people have got to buy it, because I see so many fighters out there who it just does not look anything like their jab when they fake their jab. Some cool kicks. What I really liked was, with any of these fighters, sometimes their physical attributes allow them to do something that you would not suggest any other fighter try. But there's also, in performances by people like, Roy Jones Jr. or whatever, there's stuff that you go, don't try that. You're not Roy Jones Jr. in his prime. And when Roy Jones Jr. wasn't in his prime, that got him really badly hurt. But there's also stuff in there that you're going, you don't need to be Roy Jones Jr. for that to be tricky. And everyone needs a few tricky looks to throw the opponent off. Because if you're just going 1s and 2s all the time, you get Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady, or we'll talk about that later. But then it's just like attrition between levels of athleticism and durability and endurance. But I really liked Natalia Silva's side kicks as her back was to the cage. Now, throwing a side kick with your back to the cage to the head, very, very tricky. If you watch even someone like Bill Wallace, Superfoot, when he threw high kicks with his lead leg, he had such wonderful control of his lead leg. He used to be able to he'd get someone to wear a cap, and he'd put his foot up there, grip it between his big toe and his second toe, and lift it off their head and bring it down again. The guy used to do loads of cool little party tricks like that, but he had such control over his lead leg. So if you go watch clips of him, even with that control, when he wants to throw his lead leg high from close range, he leans back. So there's a great exhibition match he had with Joe Louis, Joe Lewis, not Joe Louis, the boxer. Joe Louis, the heavyweight kickboxer. They had a great exhibition match years after either of their primes. In that match, Superfoot does things like he gets close with his guard up, and then he throws a left hook to the body, left hook to the head, and then he leans back and throws a high kick with his left leg. And he used to catch people out with that all the time, or a side kick to the body or a side kick to the head. But he leans back. If your back is to the fence, you can't do that. So when Natalia Silva kicked Jessica Andrade in the neck with a high kick, that with her back to the fence and nowhere to lean, standing straight upright, that was quite impressive. But the one that really you can steal as a regular person, or someone with the appropriate flexibility for a fighter or a kickboxer, not freakish flexibility, is the side kick to the body with your back to the fence anyway. If you've got your back foot on the fence, throw the front kick, the teep, or the side kick to the body, any sort of straight line pushing kick, you can ram your body into the fence. So when the opponent runs in, if you put your teep or your push kick or your side kick into them and they run onto it, you can't fall over, which is really useful. There's loads of great examples. I think Benson Henderson did it to Brandon Thatch. Rob Whittaker did it to Yoel Romero when he was stunned. He was wobbling all over the place. Yoel ran at him, and he just put his back foot into the cage. As in, like, wedged it at the bottom, not put his foot up on the cage. Wedged his foot against the bottom of the cage, picked up his lead leg, push kicked, and again, like one of those techniques that is always more effective when the opponent's running onto it. Yoel Romero clatters into it and bounces off, and Whittaker gets a bit more time to get his senses together. But it's really useful, and everyone should be doing it. So yeah, you don't need to be able to do weird head kicks. You just need to be able to wedge your back foot into the fence and then pick your lead leg up. The other cool kick that was in this one, I liked the back kicks throughout. Who else did I see doing that this weekend? If you miss a left hook, step through and spin. Spin for a back kick because it's great. Maybe it was Usman Nurmagomedov, but if you miss a left hook, you can use the pivot to turn your feet onto a line, so you're sideways to the opponent, and then you can spin through on the kick. You can also just do that walking through, as Natalia Silva did towards the end of the fight. She was walking like feet across each other. So imagine you're facing someone, turn round to your right side and start walking to your right while still looking at them. That's what we're talking about here. And as her left foot went across, she spun into the back kick, and that worked really well too. The other one I really liked was she brought out the hatchet kick, which is a very seldom seen kick. It's just a form of axe kick, but it comes in on an angle over the lead shoulder. So she went inside low kick with her lead leg, and then she picked it up, brought it up to her right, and then brought it down from high on the right to low on the left is where she brought it down across Andrade's head. Hard to knock someone out with. What you will see, though, Stephen Thompson used to do this. He'd use it to knock the opponent's lead hand down and then come in with the right hand afterwards, just fall into the right hand. That works great. But she managed to catch Andrade with it, and it looked cool, which is the most important point. I think the other thing that surprised me, maybe another testament to how washed Andrade is, but I thought, Natalia Silva is small for this weight. She still was taller than Andrade, but she's smaller. Like, Andrade is a hoss. And having seen Silva versus Araujo, I thought Andrade would be able to muscle her around a bit, and she didn't. Silva was able to fight off her hands almost every point in the fight. Andrade never really got her looking like she was off balance. There was a lot of Natalia Silva running along the fence with her chin up in the air. She'd throw her punches and then she'd start running, and that's sketchy and dangerous. If Andrade were faster and still as explosive as she used to be, that might have been more dangerous. Or if Andrade was a much smarter fighter, but she isn't. But yeah, that stuff always worries you. Not being able to get off the fence effectively. She spent an awful lot of time on the fence and not really covering up so well. She just beat Andrade to the punch and then duck. But I have to say, she was probably the standout performer of the weekend for me. She was fantastic. What else have we got? We got some finishes, but they weren't super impressive. Isaac Dulgarian just mauled Brendan Morote, who is like, how did you get here, bro? I know he's filled in at last minute for someone else. Because as DC always points out on the broadcast, filling in at last minute is the only way to come into the UFC, not through the Contender Series, which is terrible, to be honest. But this guy did not look like he belonged here. Isaac Dulgarian just mauled him for the first round, and then in the second round mauled him again, but got an arm triangle. Cody Durden versus Matt Schnell was good fun. I'm watching a load of early lightweight boxing at the moment for my next history episode, which is coming up in the nearish future. So I'm watching lots of Joe Gans battling Nelson, Ad Wolgast. I say lots of. There's not a lot of them available. But those old fights, they throw big jab right hook, fall into the other guy. You throw your right hook and then you drop it over like the crook of the guy's elbow and push his forearms down into his chest, start leaning on him, and then you're in the infight. And that's how like all these fights went, because it was, Gans and Nelson went 40 rounds the first time. So grueling ass fights and just sort of falling into each other over and over again eventually. And that was kind of what this was like. It was just like throw 3 or 4 punches, fall into each other, throw 3 or 4 more punches. It was wild, but it was good fun. Schnell ended up shooting in round 2. And I saw on the results that this was an anaconda choke, and people were talking about the anaconda choke. And I thought, oh, that's interesting for Schnell to get caught in an anaconda choke. He's a good wrestler and a good grappler. When you go for an anaconda choke from the front headlock, you open yourself up to a sucker drag, which is a very easy way to come up behind someone or just, get out and re-threaten them or get out to your feet, because you have to put your arm deep from neck to armpit. Darce is armpit to neck. Anaconda is neck to armpit. But it wasn't. It wasn't an anaconda at all. It was a ninja choke or a power guillotine or whatever you want to call it. He had Schnell's neck in the crook of his elbow, crook of his arm, and then he slapped a rear naked choke grip over the top of it. There was no arm involved. An anaconda's an arm in, or it's an arm triangle choke. So there's an arm involved. The opponent's arm is in the circle that you're choking with. And it wasn't there. So Schnell was in a power guillotine, which is a really solid move. If you train with lots of MMA fighters, they don't tend to tap to guillotines unless you slap on the power guillotine. and then it's like they're going to go to sleep. I think Schnell retired off this one. It was a fun fight. Schnell's last couple of... I mean, Schnell's always been fun, actually. He's always been known for two things: having fun fights, getting like beaten up a lot in recent years. And I suppose the third thing would be going to bat for the UFC to keep fighter pay low. He's taken on the role of Sam Alvey, and he's not even in the higher weight classes. So they'll never give him anything extra for it, like the benefit of the doubt. You're on a 5-fight losing streak, 6-fight losing streak, Sam Alvey. But stick around because you say nice things about the pay structure. Steve Garcia won, another asterisk, because the fight basically turned around. Kyle Nelson got on his back early, and then, as with probably about 50% of back takes in MMA, ended up on the bottom eventually, because if you lock yourself into back position where you're both looking up at the ring lights, you don't have any weapons to hit them with effectively. You can't use your weight on them, so you're just trying to choke them, and they're just going to grab that hand, which has a big glove over it, stopping it from going under their neck effectively. They're going to whip it over their head, and they're going to turn into you and end up on top in closed guard, which he did. Stepped over to half guard, started dropping some elbows. Kyle Nelson turned in towards him. Steve Garcia elbows him in the brainstem. It's just one of the most flagrant illegal elbows I've ever seen. Kyle Nelson reacts really badly immediately, but keeps fighting, and then Steve Garcia gets the stoppage. And like Kyle Nelson stands up, and you see him talking to Mark Smith, and there's a giant golf ball on the back of his head. So a bit disappointing, especially as an end to Kyle Nelson's exciting little streak there. But then we can't pick and choose our illegal blows, because Lorenz Larkin fought in Bellator. He was probably the highlight of the weekend, aside from Natalia Silva, to be honest. He took on Levan Chocolate. This is finally, apparently, to get him a title shot, because he's been in Bellator forever, fighting at welterweight and middleweight. He's like the best thing they have, but they've never given him a title shot. And he came out, and Levan Chocolate actually put it on him. He was throwing 3 and 4 punch combinations, and Larkin was not rolling them off effectively. He's got a good shoulder roll, he's got good covers and slips, but he was getting dinged. And then he decided, oh, screw it, I'll just step in. He did his usual cross-check thing, which is left hand across the opponent's body to their left hand, start pulling it down, which puts you in danger, but it also really throws a lot of people because you don't see it often. So he does that, and then he jabs with that same hand, and he scores. And then he double jabs, and Chokele's slipping his head side to side as Larkin's lining up the right hand, drops him, and then he follows him to the floor and punches straight down on the back of his head. Gets the stoppage, but I was watching it going, ooh, very illegal, very illegal. But luckily, the back of the head doesn't really exist in MMA, which is why I'm a little bit skeptical about the return of the 12-6 elbow. I'm all up for 12-6 elbows being legalized, but there are already so many elbows that go in onto the back of the head that referees just ignore. They go, oh, it had an arc on it, and you're like, I don't care, it hit him in the brainstem. And speaking of elbows, Chris Badilla's knockout of Rong Zhu, or TKO of Rong Zhu, was incredible. Rong Zhu looked really good in this one, I thought. If he just had a little bit more of a educated jab, I'd say, or an effective jab, because he was putting his jab out, and in fact he got countered just showing a double jab and not really being ready for something to come back. The nice thing about the double jab when he put it out there like that, half-assedly, is that its job is to chew up space by moving the guy back, or draw out reactions. If he stands his ground and slips, you've got slips for free, basically. You've got him to do a movement and take himself out of position without really opening up. But if you're not ready for something to come back, then you've sort of you've missed half the point of the move. It's a move where you open up very little to get some reactions, but you have to be ready for stuff coming back, because if you're trying to get reactions out of the opponent, a big counter swing has got to be like top of the list of things that can happen. So Rong Zhu just marched in like behind this half-assed double jab, wasn't ready at all for the elbow that came in, hit him right in the eyeball, point of the elbow. Replay was incredible. And naturally, as always happens with these ones, if you remember, I think it was Ponzinibbio versus Magny, he was just so accurate with his jab. He was jabbing Magny in the eye, right on the eyeball. And Magny kept going, he's poking me. And you'd watch the replay and his fist would be closed. I mean, Ponzi has poked some people in the past, but these were just good jabs on the eye because it feels awful. But man, Rong Zhu's eye blew up. I said the other dude's head was like a golf ball, but this looked like he pulled his eyelid out, put a golf ball under it, and then let it close again. Because, as not a doctor, I would have gone in there to examine him and go, oh, God, no. Stop this fight. Something horrible is going to happen if you get hit on that again. As it turns out, it's probably just blood building up in his eyelid or something like that. But man, gross. And good job, Chris Padilla. But this fight was cooking decently, I thought. Rongzhu, what I really liked was he threw a right hand at Padilla on the counter. Padilla threw something and stepped off to his left. And Rongzhu threw the right hand right straight down the center and missed because Padilla went down his side. So the next time that Padilla comes in with a jab or whatever, Rongzhu throws his right hand. He doesn't have much power behind it. He just throws it out wide and slaps him with it and then kicks him in the leg afterwards. It was really lovely. Just using circular blows to cut him off as he circled round. You don't need to hit him hard. You just need to put something on them so that you've got a check on them from moving further in that direction, and so that you can, you just punch to where your hand is now, or kick to roughly below where your hand is. You got some proprioception helping you along. So main event, Sean Brady, Gilbert Burns. Impressive, but kind of not what people wanted to see. Gilbert Burns clearly lost a step, not looking as fast as he used to, even like last fight against Jack Della Maddalena. He's always been dangerous in the early going and slowed down and then got chewed up by jabs and straight hitting while he's trying to throw his big swings. Straight punches get boxers plums. Classic Joe Gans quote, which will come up a lot in that history episode, I imagine. But right off the bat, Brady got to work with the inside low kick and he was actually doing it pretty effectively. I'm going to try and remember, I commented this on a Twitter post of a knockout from this weekend. Hold on. Niklas Stoltz knocked out Matuz Cahoot on Octagon 60, which is, Octagon's pretty good. Check it out. But and Cahoot basically stands in front of him, thinks he's going to move back, so he steps up and throws an inside low kick. And in that step up and get on one leg portion, the other guy steps in and throws a 1-2. If you get caught on one leg with the guy in punching range, with the him in distance to put his right hand on your chin and you're standing on one leg, you are in trouble. So getting a read on the opponent's movement and throwing the inside, the step up, any kind of step up kick from appropriate distance is really important. And he was doing that with his low kick really well early on, Sean Brady. But he comes out for round 2, or was it round 3? Yeah, it was round 2. He immediately throws a step up left kick to the body, which lands, but Gilbert Burns' left hand comes down onto the back of the knee, sticks to him, parries it down and throws the right hand on the counter, chins Brady on one leg, sends him stumbling. And then he ran in and gave up underhooks and got turned onto the fence. But that was about the best thing Burns landed in this entire fight, was from a lazy step-up kick to the body. What I liked from Brady, he's getting lots of accusations of pillow fistery, having very light hands that don't do much damage. But I think he was making the read perfectly on Gilbert Burns. The one thing that he kept doing was 1-2 left uppercut, or like a sort of bolo-y punch coming up on a 45, but coming up from underneath, because every time Gilbert Burns slid back, went into a long guard, so right hand high, left arm straight, left shoulder up to the chin, head down, but because his head was down, the uppercut had hit him, and then Brady would change onto a clinch or onto a double leg, and it worked really well over and over again. He just went 1-2 left uppercut, 1-2 left uppercut right straight, 1-2 left uppercut left hook, just kept doing it. Because if you're going to use that long guard, there's the long guard which sort of obstructs the opponent, as in puts some challenges in between them hitting you, puts some stuff in front of some targets. But then there's the long guard as it's used really well by top level Thais, where they're putting the hand, that extended hand hits one of the shoulders. They can feel what you're doing. They're pushing you back as you try and punch them. That's the real art of the long guard, which a lot of people will never get into. Just using the long guard without any attachment to the opponent and without any attempt to stifle their offense by pushing them will improve your defensive skills over just standing there covering up. So, it's not the worst thing in the world that Gilbert hasn't learned this stuff, but it did mean that because he was doing the same thing over and over again, Sean Brady could do the same thing over and over again and exploit it. Really liked Brady's double jab in this one, and double jab is something I'm always on about, but this was a different kind of double jab. Double jab I'm usually talking about is to get the opponent moving, force them back towards the cage, or get them to start slipping so that you can put a lead on them and work out what they're going to do. It's to get them to show you reactions. It's to dull their reactions to your follow-ups. Or it's just to break rhythm. You go double jab. They think you throw. They expect a 1-2, but then the 2 comes after the double jab. That works all the time in MMA. Highest levels. Think of when Glover knocked down Jiri. Double jabs. Jiri's done a big lean back, and then he tries to lean again when the second jab comes, and then he's got nowhere to go when the right hand comes after. But this double jab is the one that Evander Holyfield used to throw, which is, and Bivol does this too, if you want a modern fighter. Stand close enough to jab the opponent, you jab hard, and they palm it. You pull it back and you immediately jab again. Because they're not going to palm it twice. They're going to palm it and then they're going to start trying to do something else or expect you to stop. So you just throw it twice as hard as you can. And Evander Holyfield used to do this all the time. You just expect the first one to get blocked and you throw the second one immediately so that you catch him afterwards. And it throws people right off. It was really giving Gilbert trouble in this match. And the great thing about like landing the jab on the end of things, so like inside low kick jab, pick up the lead leg as if to teep and then step forward and jab, throw the right hand first and then jab. Those are all examples of like not having a very fast jab. You set the jab up, you trick the guy, you landed your jab, and now he's going, oh my God, I've got to worry about his jab. So you get all the benefits of like establishing your jab without actually having to have the speed to establish it as a standalone weapon. So the double jab in this instance works like that too. And now Gilbert has to respect your jab. I think the way the grappling played out was that Gilbert Burns had some very clever little technical looks. And basically anytime Brady got anything going, took him down or anything like that, Gilbert Burns was immediately up and doing something to threaten Brady. But Brady could keep going back to the well, keep threatening him. And Gilbert Burns would do one cool technique every 4 minutes or something like that. And that was basically the whole grappling matchup summarized. And then on the feet, it was like Gilbert Burns has always thrown fewer shots very, very hard, and Brady was just peppering him constantly. It was a case of, this was Brady winning by being young and in great shape, and Gilbert Burns not being able to do what he does constantly for 25 minutes. But the few moments you get of Gilbert Burns doing cool technical things are more than worth the price of entry. He got taken down in, I think, the second round, and immediately Brady took him down and stepped between his legs to try and turk the leg or just put himself in half guard because that makes it hard for him to scramble up. And Gilbert Burns immediately underhooked the other leg, took Brady straight over the top of him and did like a classical technical stand-up sweep and ended up on the back body lock on Brady. There were a couple of cool things where Brady would push him to the fence and then drop on a leg, and Gilbert Burns would push his head down, grab his butt and swing him into the mat. That was a big thing in ADCC whenever they went to Nottingham, when they were in England, or maybe it was the one in China. Both Buchecha and Cyborg turned up doing this move where they would stand up from their guard, but leaving one leg in front of the opponent, obviously. So the opponent would grab the leg with their head on the outside, and then Buchecha or Cyborg would push their head down, grab their butt or their thigh, and just do what's sometimes called a head tilt and throw them into the mat. And no one really did it again after that. It was them in 2 or 3 big matches at ADCC, and then you never saw it again. I think that was round 3. He did a cool butt drag head tilt thing, and then I really liked Brady was always getting double underhooks, and Gilbert Burns was always giving up double underhooks. He'd do things like jumping double knee near the fence and give up double underhooks and get turned onto the fence, and then lose 30 seconds fighting off the double underhooks. But he did a great job of getting his head posted underneath Brady's to create space between their chests and loosen or weaken the underhooks. And then when Brady tried to move a hand, he'd grab it with an upwards grip on the wrist and circle out, and that worked really well too. But yeah, just a case of Gilbert Burns not being able to do enough and Brady putting on the volume, doing the Bilal thing that Bilal did to Burns just by keeping stuff going for 25 minutes. Gilbert Burns has never been made for 25-minute fights, and he's only getting older and slower. And he definitely wasn't kicking as actively against Brady because Brady was threatening to try and take him down the entire time. Not the most fun performance from Brady, but decently impressive. I don't think we're looking at... this is the thing. I mean, Bilal's just won the title by being a decent all-rounder and game planning appropriately, but I don't think Brady is going to be... I don't want to say he won't be like top 5 material or anything like that, but I don't think he's ever going to be as great as some people thought he would be. Because he had a couple of great matches, like the one against Jake Matthews, where he just looks like a complete fighter and is absolutely whooping on Matthews everywhere the fight goes. But he just looks so lost against Bilal. And even here, we all agree that he won, but we're all like, was it that impressive? Speaking of not that impressive, Usman Nurmagomedov versus Chablis. Basically, Chablis found his counter right hand in the first and second round and a little bit in the third. and then fought like he didn't have to do anything else. and Usman and Magomedov, the judges were crazy because one of them gave him every round. And like watching that fight, it was basically impossible to do. But, this is MMA judging. But there was no way that Chablis should have been sitting back in round 4 and 5 being like, I think I got this in the bag, fellas. But it was very weird to come out of that fight being like, I don't know who's going to stop Usman. He just looks unbelievable. That was an incredible domination. It's like, no, it wasn't. He did nothing until he landed a head kick in round 4 and then he finally got going. Save the I don't know who's going to beat him for fights that like Islam versus Oliveira or something like that. That's the fight we go, oh my God, I don't know who's going to beat him. But looking mid for 3 rounds and then finally showing up is not the fight to do that with. There was also some kickboxing this weekend, which I'll cover on the Boycast, and a bit of grappling at Polaris. But all in all, loads of fights were on. Some of them were good. kind of sad because I did an hour-long Boycast previewing all of this stuff and being like, I'm really excited. And then only a few things really paid off. But it wasn't always the things that I expected. I thought Natalia Silva versus Jessica Andrade would be okay. And that turned out to be like my fight of the weekend. And I thought Superbomb versus Haggerty would be a real step up on their first fight. And for about a minute it was, but that's fighting. You never know. Next week we got the Sphere, and I'll be previewing all that stuff on the Boycast. I'll probably write something about one of the fighters or one of the matchups ahead of time. And I've got some history episodes coming soon on the Patreon as well. So sign up to the Patreon to support the podcast and get all the extra stuff. Send an email to the podcast at jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And to see what I'm writing at your time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. Matthew Schnell, what The Rock is cooking. Bless.